Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Patterns and Practices webcast, and this, not a webcast, well, how did I do that again? So this is the General SharePoint Development Special Interest Group. This is the bi-weekly call where we talk about SharePoint development in the kind of a larger scale. So in these bi-weekly calls, we're typically moving into the direction where we take one topic, like a site designs or a column formatting, and then we concentrate on covering that throughout. Today we'll have Jax talking about the Flow and Power Apps, but I'll come back on that one in a second. So just quickly introducing what the SharePoint Patterns and Practices is all about. The SharePoint Patterns and Practices basically equals SharePoint Developer Community. So this is a community which was started many years ago, which has been evolving to be the SharePoint developer messaging, for official messaging from the Microsoft. So we are the people who also are responsible for all of the documentation and all of the other messaging and marketing efforts in the Microsoft side. So I personally, I'm working as a senior program manager from Microsoft in the engineering team, which is responsible of the SharePoint framework and APIs and all of that. But my role is also to explain how to use those things, which is pretty important. So the General Dev Special Interest Group call has a bi-weekly schedule. And in here, this is an open discussion around the general SharePoint development topics. We do have another one, which is called the Special Interest Group call for SharePoint Framework. So in there, we talk about more specifics on a SharePoint framework. In here, this is kind of a more open topic. Like in this case, we'll talk about the Flow and Power Apps. Now, opportunities to participate with the community. So this is just keeping this one in the slides as well. We absolutely welcome people to demo their solutions or samples or technical patterns in this call. Just reach out to me, Bert or Patrick or somebody in the team or any of the MVPs in the team, and we'll get you scheduled on this call. This is actually, by the way, a great opportunity if you are an existing MVP or you want to be an MVP in the future. If you want to have visibility and those let's say in quotes the MVP points collected to yourself, this is a great way to do that. So you'll get a free 10 to 15 minutes demo seat to talk about whatever you want. A small reminder, people, please remember to mute yourself so there's no background noise except what's coming behind me. Now, you can always contribute on GitHub as well, so issues, pull requests, all of that stuff, and then in general provide feedback. Use the technical community and other tooling to tell us what's wrong. So don't just, let's say, don't have a discussion with your colleagues and complain that Microsoft isn't listening and they don't know what to do. Tell us how we can help you. That's a really important thing as well. So we know those things. In many of the things, yes, we know that there's always a problems. For example, in Office 365, that's a massive platform. So there's always bugs here and there or things which could be better. And we are working on many of them. But getting your feedback using the user voice and alternatives channels is super important for us as well. Now, moving on things. So today I have a few slides and general announcements, and let's have a look on the roadmap update on the stuff which was announced in Build. And we can't really talk about what's going to happen next week in Las Vegas, so we're going to announce additional stuff there as well. But then we'll kind of leave the stage for Jax to go through Microsoft Flow and Power Apps in the context of SharePoint. So this is the latest changes on that side, and these are actually really interesting as well. So because they give you humongous amount of actually, let's say, tools and opportunities without you being forced to write the whole thing by yourself. But I'll let Jackson explain what that means actually in practice. Now, moving on things. So documentation guidance, promised to keep this slide in the presentation since the dawn of the whatever future. So SP Dev Docs, AKMS SP Dev Docs, or docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint and developer is where you can find all of our official documentation. You can contribute, you can have discussions in the communities. Please let us know if something is wrong. You can also submit a pull request for us towards us, so we'll get it your typo fixes or article fixes processed as well. Now, the other thing, if you run into an issue, potential bug in the service, please let us know as well. We are synchronizing these twice a week, typically, to our VSO. Well, VSO synchronization happens all the time, but we process these twice a week. Now, to be fair, right now we have a pretty big queue on issues to get processed because a lot of the key players have been in build, and we've been prepping on SPC, which is coming on next week. So we're slightly behind of schedule on getting all of this processed. But if you run into critical issues, please let us know so we can act on potential critical issues ASAP. And if it's not a critical issue, just let us know still, and we'll get on it as soon as possible. Now, a few additional kind of announcements on those typical, on top of the typical slides. Today we released a new version of SharePoint Online Management Shell. Just let everybody know this. Not technically a developer topic, but well, as a developer, you quite often have to do certain things. There is one new PowerShell commandlet, which I somehow magically didn't actually mention in the slide. So that PowerShell commandlet name is, I need to go to my Twitter and double check that because I just can't remember what it was, but I'm going to paste in the PowerShell commandlet or the link to the documentation of that PowerShell commandlet in the ION window. It's this one. And the PowerShell commandlet name is export SPO query logs. And this is around the GDPR, let's say, requirements for SharePoint Online and Office 365. So this is around being able to export data based on a user profile in SharePoint Online. So if somebody's asking that to happen, there's a tool to make that happen within the tenant level. No, what else? Roadmap. Quick comments on this one. We went to we announced the updated roadmap in Microsoft Build last week, and we covered this one briefly in the last week's special interest group call as well. The main changes in the roadmap, well, obviously ALM APIs. Let's actually quickly go this through. ALM APIs are out. You can use them in the site collection app catalog or in the tenant app catalog. So that's completely generally available. Asset packaging, that's the thing that we have an automatic CDN testing and CDN hosting, which is pretty cool. Tenant properties is generally available. Site collection app catalog generally available this spring as well. Native graph access for SharePoint Online is in preview. And like I said in the build session, which is also recorded, unfortunately, this will not go to GA in the SPC. So we need to wait until the following version, which will come out in unknown time. So we don't actually technically know the time for that. So right now, unfortunately, this capability is not yet ready to go general available. So we need to delay that slightly. API and dev support for numerous out-of-the-box features refers to, well, for example, site design actions and site actions, which have been added during the spring. Now, summer fall, native graph access for SharePoint Framework GA. So GA will happen absolutely, roughly on summer or fall timeframe. We're trying to make that happen as fast as possible for the graph access, but for now, it's not going to happen next week. Just a bit of a warning on that one. Enterprise solutions from SharePoint to Microsoft Teams, huge thing. If you've seen the recording from a build, it's pretty cool setup. We will actually talk about this one in a much more detailed way in upcoming SPC, starting from Sunday, actually, from the workshops. Then ISV solutions from Microsoft Teams to SharePoint. And this interesting scenario as well. So by Ignite, we're looking into having you the opportunity of associating any of those ISVs which are in the Teams tab to also host in a SharePoint site. So not just put the SharePoint Webparts to Teams, but also get the existing SharePoint, Teams customizations in the SharePoint site. And this is really, I personally, just reinforced message here. It's a really fundamental change in our internal thinking as well. We want to start consolidating the way we support and implement customizations in Office 365. So basically, we already have discussions with other teams. So for example, Office add-ins extensibility team, it would kind of make sense for using SharePoint Framework for that as well, and a few other teams as well. Will those things happen? No idea. But we are having this consolidation between SharePoint and Teams, and that starts moving forward, which is absolutely brilliant. Now we are, obviously, the other teams are looking into how this is going. From a developer perspective, I think it's the best thing ever, because you build once using the same tooling across all of the services, and then you're able to surface your customization in a different locations. So super great direction. We'll still need to absolutely wait for some time to get everything available for you as a developer, but it's absolutely coming. We are making significant investment on that. Now, global deployments for SharePoint Framework, super cool thing. You're able to push, for example, extensions and command line, command view, command set view, list view command sets, that's the right term. List view command set to the lists globally, so you're able to say from a local location that, hey, this button, put it visible in all of the document libraries without any additional things. So you have a centralized control of making stuff happen. Dynamic data and SharePoint Framework components, that's basically Webpart to Webpart communications, including though extensions. So you are much more aware and you're able to bypass data between the components in a page. And also SharePoint Framework at SharePoint 2019. The exact dates for that one coming later. Most likely you will see here are the dates in next week in SBC. I think there's a session actually on Monday on SharePoint Server 2019, and so more details on that one over there. Now, quickly addressing the question from Joel, anywhere the modern UI for document sets, there is an internal discussion ongoing on this one. We are absolutely aware of that gap. There are other gaps in the modern UIs, and we're gradually getting those addressed as well. Now, if there is a user voice entry for that one, I can't remember. I would ask people always that votes on the user voice entries, because more votes means that it will be more visible in the senior leadership level, and then the senior leadership level who decides our priorities will basically say, well, this thing which we're planning to do, that's a number 2 in a user voice, well, absolutely makes that happen. If it's a random whatever ask from an PM, which let's say some random PM from Microsoft comes with a great idea, it's like, okay, is anybody asking this? So the user voice points do actually matter quite a lot in our priorities. So we know what are the things which we need to do first. Obviously, there's certain things which don't go through the user voice, but please remember that channel as well. Good. Cool. So quickly, so moving on things. So more details obviously on SharePoint Conference 2018 starting from Sunday. The Monday is the keynote. We'll have a really great keynote full of announcements in here and there and there. There's quite a lot of stuff coming up on that keynote. If you cannot make Las Vegas, that keynote is streamed, so you're able to actually join on that one. I think it is the virtual summit, and I'll get the link for that one when Jax is starting to talk, unless somebody else has it already in their hands. So basically the Monday's keynote will be streamed live from Las Vegas, so you're able to join on that one and have a look on what's actually being announced. Then the actual sessions in Las Vegas are not unfortunately recorded, but the key announcements will happen in a keynote. And then after the Las Vegas, after the SBC, we'll keep on having special interest group calls, for example, for SharePoint Framework next Thursday, and then the following one. So whatever will be announced next week, we'll talk about them in the community calls as well. Cool. Good comment from Ralph. Not going to comment anything on that one. Good. So let's actually switch to Jax. So I took pretty typical 15 minutes from the start. So Jax has the stage for following, let's say 30 minutes, depending on how much you actually want to talk. And Jax, sorry, I did mute you. So you probably can get yourself unmuted. So let me do this. Can you hear me? Hello?
I can.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, all good. So I can. Did you, by the way, ended up in the office already? Just out of curiosity, or are you at home?
No, I am still. I'm just joining from my home.
Okay.
I haven't, but I'm all set to go to office. So
cool. Yeah, it's a 7 a.m. in Pacific time, so it's slightly early, but that's fine.
Yep.
So,
I'm going to take over as presenter, so I can actually present my desktop. So, hi everyone, I am Chakradeep. Many of you know me as Chucks. I was part of the SharePoint framework and the Webparts when it all started 3 years ago. It was a good journey. So after that, I went to focus on the maker scenarios. So basically with Flow and Power Apps integration with SharePoint, especially putting the same thinking hat of what we started with SharePoint framework is how can we make the framework work for both first parties and third parties. And one of my new challenges in this new role is also to look at how can Flow and Power Apps be part of the first party scenarios as well. And you'll hear a lot next week in SharePoint conference on all the investments we're making in both the platforms. Today, I wanted to concentrate more on the various releases we have done and released as part of the spring update. So if you haven't been in this maker area, which is really, not really making something very specific to a target audience, but it's basically makers to us mean that people who don't have to write code, or for the projects where you don't have to write code and just use the out-of-the-box tools and other applications to build the things you want to build in the platform. And with Microsoft having Power Apps as the key business app platform to build your apps, so Power Apps is the choice that SharePoint has taken forward when you consider the olden days of InfoPath, right? So InfoPath let you build a lot of custom forms and also build you standalone applications and have it deployed to SharePoint and many other areas. So Power Apps is similar to that, where now you can actually do the things you can do in InfoPath in Power Apps. And the same thing is with the Microsoft Flow, is our workflow orchestration platform that connects not just to SharePoint, but also to many other services. And you can see today we already have around 200 plus services in Flow, where you can go and say, hey, if something happens in, Google Photos or Gmail, go do something, or something happens in Office 365, Exchange, or SharePoint. Let's go do something in the workflow orchestration tool. So both of these have lots of power, and we're going to be flowing with power, if you consider the pun, and see a lot of updates. Excuse me. So in the tech community blog post, I will paste this link in the chat window. Chris McNulty, who is our marketing counterpart, just added a blog post in the tech community portal on the various updates that we released and some of the updates that are rolling out now in Flow and Power Apps area. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, all good, all good. Now we got it. So
excellent. So we have been very busy. So there's like a lot of cool stuff that was completed, and this was based on a lot of feedback we heard from you guys, supporting multi-valued fields and taxonomy fields in Power Apps, so you can bring those into your app, and custom forms. Rewrite for attachments. So that's another big update that happened a few weeks ago, roughly I think during the MVP summit that we had, and that was really good. There's a Flow launch panel. I will show you the demo. So there's a lot of stuff in here that if you read through this blog post, you will find. What I am concentrating on today is kind of going to show you some of the things with the Power Apps Webpart preview that is available today in the first release tenants. The attachment support, let's have a look at that. There's a new out-of-the-box flow called request sign-off. It's a very simple, lightweight approval workflow that you can ask someone for feedback and kind of sign off certain documents or list items. And then the content approval flow action. So content approval is a very key feature in ECM. You can have pages and documents or list items in draft, pending, and approved and rejected stages. And then we have our mighty powerful SharePoint HTTP request flow action, and then the item deleted flow trigger. So I'm going to go through these one by one and show you a demo of what we have been doing in this area. Now, before going to the demos, I want to I want to just ask something from the community is that I am going to be more prevalent in the community with the maker scenarios. So if you have feedback, if you have any sort of issues that you're going through, feel free to reach us via PnP, the official channels that you already know where you go give feedback. We are going to take it seriously, and we are going to be part of the community. We haven't been, truth be told, we haven't been that open yet. But I think now this is our chance to have maker scenarios as part of this whole developer platform, and make things simple for everyone to go build. So Webpart. So let's have a look at the Webpart. So Power App Webpart. So here's an app that I just built, and it's basically an org browser that you see in the sample Power Apps. And that's just going to load the app, and you can see how big the app is for a reason that it is built to fit the mobile layout. And then it basically gives you all the org chart of your in your org. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this app, basically embed this app in a SharePoint page. Previously, you could select the content embed Webpart, and then you put the URL of the, you build the iframe code, and then you put the iframe code, middle width, the height, width, and even auth, right? Because content embed Webpart doesn't really know what Power App means and how to authenticate and do all the other things it needs to do to set up. So now with the Power Apps Webpart, which is available in first release tenants as a preview, if you search for Power, you'll get Power Apps Webpart. And then there you can put the app web link or ID. In this case, I copied the app link. So now as soon as I put that, you will see the app loading here in my screen, and there it is. That's the app. And some of the things, if you see here, was it didn't ask for my sign-in information. So we handle the sign-in information for the user here when you add the Webpart. Now, one thing we don't do is we don't grant permissions to the users. So you have to ensure that the app is shared with the appropriate folks, whether it's shared with everyone in the org or the specific group site, so that users have access to the app. The other things we also provide option is to resize the app. So at the bottom, you can now resize the app to its maximum size. Maybe you just want it much smaller, you can do that as well. So we give you that opportunity, and we also scale the app to kind of a percentage that it fits the SharePoint visualization, so it doesn't look really good as you saw in this particular scenario where I opened the app in the browser. So now if I publish, this is going to behave as any other Webpart. And now I can basically do all my stuff in here. I don't have to go beyond the site, and then it's going to basically work the same way it is supposed to work in Power App web browser. Now this is a first release. Like, this is probably the first step in making Power Apps embed in the SharePoint page. And we have lots of updates. There is a reason why it's called preview. We are kind of making sure things are all aligned in the back end. The performance is right. We don't get much. It's a page. It needs to look good. It needs to behave like a Webpart on a page. So there's a lot of stuff in here that we are looking into, and you'll see us pushing more updates before we go GA for this Webpart. But if you are using this Webpart, or if you haven't yet, I would suggest you to use the Webpart and give us as much as feedback we can get from you guys, so we can then get that time to go see if we can, if there is some problem that we need to fix before going GA, or is there some options that we are missing before we go GA as well. So that is the Webpart, Power Apps Webpart demo. Any questions on this? Okay, I'm going to go to the next demo. Lots of demo. So attachment support. So do this. So I have a list here called projects, and this project has attachments column. So basically I want to attach some project information from documents for a project. Now, what I have done here is I have created custom form. I've added the custom form capability here. Basically, I was too quick. Let me go to that list again and show you what I did. Everyone familiar with custom forms? Anybody new to custom forms? Okay, if you are on a list or basically on a SharePoint list, you can click on this Power Apps and then Customize Forms, which will take you to the Power Apps and will have the custom form in place and will give you the necessary integration with the SharePoint list and will build you a form and a screen as well, so you can go from the start. And one of the things, if you click this SharePoint form, if you want to manage the fields that you see or you want to hide certain things, you have the data property with the SharePoint form. You click that and you will see the data source that you're connecting to, in this case, my projects list, and all the fields available for me to add or remove. And one of the fields, if you scroll down, you will see attachments. So once you add this attachment field, now it's actually going to give you the attachment control, where now this will be visible to users when they create a new item, and similarly when they view or edit the item. So let's save this and publish this to SharePoint. That means that now this will be the version that the SharePoint list will use whenever somebody creates a new edit or view form. So now I can go back to my list. I'll probably do few refresh so that it doesn't have any cache in place. There you go. So now I click new. You can see the Power App form is getting loaded rather than the SharePoint list form. Now I can give a title to this. Let's say Project 6. Let's give this project to our intern, John Doe. Due date, let's set maybe 31st. And then, oh, hang on, this hasn't yet loaded my new form because you didn't see the attachment control. There you go. Now we have the new form. So let me give project 6. Owner is John Doe. Due date, let's say 5/31/2018. Let's put India. And now I have the option to attach a file. So I can just click on attach a file. It's going to load my file dialog. I can click open, and there it is, my file. And if I click save, now you should see the new item created with the attachment in the attachment column. Oh, I don't have the attachment. Let's see. Uh-oh, something happened. Let me attach again. Good times. It's interesting. Let us see what this is doing. There isn't anything. It shouldn't happen. Anyways, this should work. And if you try in your custom forms, you should see it working. And this was actually working when I tried it yesterday night. Well, let's see one quick. Maybe it's a list problem. Yep, it's there. One last thing before I give up on this. attachments to the list are enabled. So yeah, I don't know what's happening. I need to go back and ping a few folks to see if this is actually working or not. It's supposed to work. It was working yesterday when I tried it out for the demo, which is also the demo I'm going to be doing at SPC. I'm going to be showing attachment control, so hope this works at SPC.
All good jokes. We're going to cut this section from a video. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
So
we'll
sort it out.
Yeah. So let's. Those were the two things in the Power Apps world. Now let's go to the Flow world, where there has been a lot of new stuff flowing through. The first one is the request sign-off flow. So imagine you wanted to get some feedback around this list item here, and you wanted to send it to someone. So I can actually now select a list item, or in the case of documents, you can select a document, and I will have a request sign-off flow. So this is something that will be available out of the box. You don't have to do any setup. I can click request sign-off, and that's going to launch my flow panel, which for some reason it took. There you go. And basically it will take me through the steps that I want to do for this particular flow. Oh, the demo gods are not being good to me today morning. Nessa, what did you do?
I can take full responsibility of this one. Oh, the switches, I wasn't supposed to change them in the data center, you see?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Skype problem.
We should have used Teams. So anyway, it's working now. So in the approver, I can say, let me put John Doe as my approver. Hey, can you take a look at this project, run flow. And then now what the flow did was it added a column called sign off status, and then it put the basically the status pending. So this is not content approval. This is a very lightweight feedback system meant to be really simple and straightforward. So we don't do any sort of locking the item or any such thing in here. Now if I actually log in as John Doe, I actually think I know what's the problem with the attachments control, but I'm not going to do that now. And let me open my email. There it is. I have got an email saying, please approve project 1. And I actually get an actionable message along with the original message that the flow sent me with the information about the project 1 list item. So I can either click on this list item, I can go look at it, and that will basically give me the view form of that list item, which is going to load my Power App. Or if I am really good, if I'm an intern and need to be, making my boss happy, I can just say, looks good, signed off. And then once you submit, that's going to go back to the list. And then if we refresh the page, it should be approved. So this is a very lightweight request sign-off feature where we're not using any of the SharePoint capabilities, but just making it a lightweight approval and sending some message to whoever you want to send it and get it approved. So the next demo is on the content approval flow action. So content approvals are basically used when, especially in the document libraries, where you have certain approval status that you want to maintain on what's the contract status, for example. Has it been approved, rejected, or is it draft? So basically the way you turn on this is if you go to library settings and then versioning settings, you will have the option to enable content approvals and then create a version each time. Now, depending on whether you're doing major version or major and minor, the way how you build these things would be very different. I'm going to show you today what happens with major and minor, and I will tell you what's the change in the major version. So what I have done is I have a flow here called document approval that I created already that is attached to this document library that I just showed you. And in there, it's going to say run this flow when a file is created. And then I'm going to get the file metadata because I need all the information that I can from the document item. And then I use this set content approval status action. So this action takes the item ID for the particular item you want to set the content approval status. In this case, it's the item ID from when a file is created. And then the particular action I want. So submit is pending, approve is approve, reject is reject. And there's a status called draft. And that would be the one that would be the default case in the major and minor version content approval setting. So whenever you upload a document, it becomes, it is put to draft state initially until you go and say it's now pending or somebody changes it for some approvals. So once I put submit, it puts the document approval status to pending, and then it starts an approval. And if the approval status is approved, I use the same content approval status action. This time I approve the status. So now the document will be approved with the approver comments. And one of the things, if you notice in my previous content approval action as well, I'm using the e-tag variable here. So e-tag is very important when you are working with documents or pages in the pages library. The e-tag represents that particular version that is waiting for the approval. So along with the document URL, you have to append the e-tag in order to get and look at that particular version that you're approving. So that's something you need to put it here in the action. And then I just send an email saying that your document was approved. If it's rejected, when the approval is rejected, I go and set the action of this content approval status to reject. So it's that simple to use it. Now let's see if this actually works, and hopefully this time it works. Just going to upload this doc right now. So I actually think that's a problem with the sync engine. Yeah, it's the OneDrive sync engine. I think that's why my attachment didn't work. So I'm going to drop it here. What is happening?
Hi, it's an MP document. Please, MP document is not.
Oh.
It's not.
Okay. It's not okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why my attachment 2 didn't work. So there's like few options why that didn't work, but we can try.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have some sample stuff in here. I have no clue what's happening with Word as well. It uploaded now. And now it's going to put everything in draft. And basically, if I look my mail, because I'm the approver for this library. And if you go back to your flow, you will see there's a flow running 17 seconds ago. And that set the content approval status to pending. And if I actually refresh this page, you should see the approval status to pending right now. And I should have received an email. There it is. A document requires your approval. And now it has my review and approve the contract document, the link to that particular document. Here again, I can click the link, or I can just approve right from the actionable message. And once I click approve, now it should see this running, and it set the content approval status to approved. And now it's going to send an email in a second. There it is. And if I go back to my library and refresh it, you should see my document status approved. And I should have got an email as well. There it is. So this is how you can use the content approval status action with the list items, document libraries, and even with pages and pages library. One thing to note with pages is that you won't get people would still be seeing the publish button, and they will still be doing that. There's no any integration yet. The only thing that will help you is whenever a page is created, you can have someone set a flow, so it can set the page status exactly the same thing we saw with the document and go through the approval process manually. So that's the content approval status action. The next one, the interesting one, is the SharePoint HTTP request flow action. So SharePoint is a very big platform with lots of APIs and lots of scenarios to cover, right? Of course, unfortunately, we can't build a flow action that represents every single API in the platform. So we decided that it would be helpful if we can have a flow action that executes SharePoint API request. So that means it opens up you the possibility of using the REST APIs, even for the scenarios, or even in the same action that may not support certain things, to use this flow action. This is very developer-oriented action, and we wanted to unblock those developers who are jumping into the space, so they're not feeling that it's very limited to their capabilities. So, of course, looking at how customers use this and what feedback you're giving us, we will improve this action, as well as we will see which ones to promote up to the, a native flow action for those specific scenarios. I've seen lots of Twitter engagement on this. People have created unique permissions. People have used the share to and copy to, move to UI. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on with this HTTP request flow action. Let's look at one of the demos of this. So if this demo works, I'm really good. Like, this is going to be the ultimatum of this. So what I have is I have projects list and I have a research and development list. And each project has an owner, right? So in this case here, I have created a flow where I can select this project, and now I can say create a research project. It will create a new list item on the research and development list, and will set the permissions of that list item only to the owner of that project, right? Pretty cool. Let's run it. So I'm going to say create research project. I don't have pretty much any input there as long as my flow panel comes up, and I'm going to say run flow, and that's started. And I'm going to go to my research and development. There is my project is created, and I'm going to see who has permission on this. So I'll go to details. I'm going to see manage access, and I have access to John Doe, myself, and my team owner. So now if I click advanced, you should see this list item has unique permissions. So that worked. So let me check this. So I'm going to go to my in private window. There's John Doe. Just making sure John Doe can see this, because we just actually use this account to set the unique permissions. There it is. Project 2 is there. Now I'm going to sign out and log in as another user. This time I'm going to log in as even though my email says CCC, it's actually Frodo Baggins. I hired him as one of my employees. So now I don't see the project 2, whereas I was able to see for John Doe. It's pretty cool, right? So now let's go and look at the flow, what we did here. So in my flow, I have a flow named Create Research Project. The trigger I have for this flow is when for a selected item. So for a selected item means for that particular item, when you select, the flow will show up. So then you can actually run that flow. So for a selected item, I get that, and then I get the item for that, which item is selected. I create a new item in the research and development list. And then now I go into setting up the unique permission. So the steps for setting up unique permission is you need to first break the role inheritance, and then you need to set add role assignments. To basically break the item permission, you pretty much only need the ID of the item that you created, which is here. But here now I'm using the HTTP action and basically saying which site address. So this is my team. And then what method? So here I have post, put, patch, all the REST API methods, right? So I'm saying post, and then I'm using the break role inheritance. Now I think it's good. So here I'm using the break role inheritance API and saying don't copy over the existing perm set, so which means I'm putting false there for that particular ID that I used in my create item, which is a research project, right? So it's pretty straightforward. If you know the SharePoint API that you are dealing with, then you can basically use this action. So this is good, but then when I use my set unique permissions, I need another extra input that I need to supply to this. Here I use the API role assignment / add role assignment with the principal ID and then the role definition ID. Now the role definition ID is a constant. If you Google for it, you're going to get it. This means contribute. There's a number for read and there's a number for edit. The principal ID is the SharePoint principal ID for the user that you want to provide, assign the unique permissions. And the item ID is the one that we created in the research project. So in order to get this ID, I am using another API called the get by email, and for the site users endpoint, right? So previously we used list, and now I'm using the site users endpoint. Now you can see how it actually goes, gives you that possibility of interacting with the various APIs you have in SharePoint. And here, when I say get by email, I'm getting the owner email from the item of that for the flow that I selected to run the flow in my projects list. So here it gave me John Doe. The other thing you can see here, I'm putting the header and saying OData equal to no metadata. This is called JSON light syntax. This means whatever gets returned as a response from SharePoint will not have any REST metadata and will only have the response, the JSON value of the response. So it makes easier for you to parse. It makes easier to even create a JSON object here in the flow using that schema. And finally, I use that ID in my principal ID. Now, one thing if you note here is that you can see the body is here. The way I access it is body of that particular action, which is sp request -get user principal, and then I straight away request ID. Now, because I said no metadata, I don't have anything else, and I just get the JSON array. I'll show you in a moment, and I just basically query that ID property from that JSON object. And that's pretty much it. And that will now set me basically create the item, break the role inheritance in that item, and then set the unique permissions for that user. And that's how I can make this work. Now, if I don't have this action, this scenario doesn't exist, right? So this is one way you can use the HTTP action. There's also another flow that I wanted to show, which is much less complex, get items by lookup field. So our get items doesn't support filtering by lookup fields, because lookup fields need to be expanded and selected, right? So we don't support both select and expand in the default get items action in flow. So rather, what I'm doing here is I'm actually now using the same HTTP request to SharePoint, and in my projects list, the country is lookup to this country's list, right? So it's very simple setup. So in my flow, you can see what I'm doing here is I'm doing a get action, and basically saying for the list in project, get me the items, select the title, and then country/title means that I'm selecting the lookup column, country/title, which is the, if you go to my projects list, you'll see the column name as country, right? So that /title, this will tell SharePoint it's a lookup column. And then I'm expanding country/title. I'm telling SharePoint to expand that. And I'm adding a filter that country/title equals New Zealand, right? So now this will basically pull you only the items with that lookup that matches this criteria with the lookup field. And again, I'm putting here no metadata. So let's test this. Now, in order to test this before, you had to basically go through, several hoops. You have to go and actually trigger the trigger. Now we have this test button. So with this test button, I can actually say I'll perform this trigger action or use a data from previous ones, right? So I'll say let's use my trigger action. It's a recurrence trigger. So I'm going to run my flow right here in my flow portal. And now it's going to show me the run activity. And you can see the response of this action that we just executed. It basically gives you a JSON array, a JSON string, a JSON object. And then the value is an array which has the result of the items, right? If this was not using the light metadata, you would have like underscore metadata, D, so much information that it'll just make you so hard to use it. So that way, now you can basically go and write really simple expressions to parse the output from this object. Sorry, the JSON object from the HTTP action is select an output. So if you add apply to each, because we want to traverse through the value array, you can say body of send an HTTP action name and then the value. So that will give you the array. So since it's an array, I can do apply to each, and inside the array, you can see now I'm saying, here it is. And I'm sending an email which basically says items apply to each, which is sort of what flow uses. If you want to now get the particular item in this for each loop, since we are not using named properties, we are using a just a JSON object. That's the reason why you're writing these expressions. We'll have items of that apply to each action, and then in that, my lookup field is country and then title, right? So it's an array again. So I have country and title. If you want this ID, I can just ID, or if I get the title, just title of the list item. Here, country and then title. And that would have sent me an email. Here it is, countries, New Zealand, right? So you can use the HTTP action for that as well. Now, one last topic, item deleted flow trigger. So a new trigger we released a few weeks back is the item deleted. So we had item created and modified, and then we were missing the item deleted trigger. So now you can have the item deleted trigger in SharePoint. So basically, if you create a flow, and search for connectors and triggers, and then click SharePoint, you should see when an item is deleted trigger. So this way, or when a file is deleted trigger. So both are different because of the metadata that gets returned. But you can use this now if you're tracking the items in a very different data set or some other applications. And if you want to know something changed in SharePoint, especially deleted, you can get the ID and the title back, and then you can use that in your system to go manage any synchronization that you need to do. So those were some of the updates that I wanted to come and show you guys of all the things that are happening in the Flow and Power Apps. I will make this something regular so I can give you some updates and talk some of the scenarios. Maybe you guys have built some great solutions that you want to show us. Let Vesan know. Let's do that as well in these calls and get to know better with Flow and Power Apps.
Absolutely. So if there's John Liu or Paul or whoever wants to demonstrate something in this course as well, more than welcome. So this would be the call where we talk about these things as well. Obviously, we talk about PowerShell, we talk about other solutions and architectures here as well. But PowerShell, Power Apps and Flow, absolutely welcome. Thank you, Jax, for the demo. I will jump to the right slide, or that was a Q&A slide. We do have 5 minutes for random Q&A towards me or Jax, and depending on the questions, if there's anything. Even though this is a developer quotes call, it's click-through. What is it? What's the right term for that? People use the citizen developer. So
run only permissions.
Any plans to support for content types in Power Apps?
Yes, we are thinking about it. It's on the roadmap. We don't know when. There are certainly other things that we're looking to fix as well, along with content types.
John Liu has a question that explains run-only permissions.
So for flows that you create when an item is selected or when a file is selected, meaning the demo that you saw of Create Research Project, where I selected a project and then I clicked on the Flow menu, and then it said Create Research Project. So those kind of flows are called manual trigger flows. And for that flow, if you go to the Flow portal as an owner of that flow, you will see manage run-only permissions. The run-only permissions, what it does is it allows you to pick the context of the user that is running the flow to be used for the SharePoint connection or any other connection if it matters. So in the SharePoint, you can say for this SharePoint connection, use the run-only user context. Now at that time, it will take the context of the user and use that context to execute the SharePoint actions you have in your flow. So this is only available for manual triggers and not for the automatic triggers, which is when an item is created or modified or deleted. That runs with the owner context. I'm not sure about PnP JS expressions. There was another question about that.
I think I missed it. But that would be for Patrick, because Patrick is on the call as well. So thinking also about PnP JS expressions is the question from Vincent.
I don't know, Jax could maybe answer this better, but I don't know that there's any real way to sort of include external libraries into flows at this point.
Yeah.
So that would almost be like doing an Azure function at that point. So you could use the HTTP call stuff, I suppose. And this is just off the top of my head. So you can call out to an Azure function and do whatever you want in that, or an Azure web app using the HTTP connection. And there you could use PnP JS or really anything at that point. But of course it should be PnP JS.
Or PnP CSOM core, either way.
No.
Whatever is your preference. Or PnP PowerShell.
Leave that stuff behind.
Yeah.
It's PnP JS all the way.
The SharePoint HTTP action, let's be very clear, it is SharePoint. It takes the share context of the user, it uses that context and works with SharePoint. If you are working with other set of REST APIs that Microsoft doesn't own or put in the platform, like a third-party API or PnP APIs, the PnP API, REST API needs to support that. It's not that we can't do it, but there needs to be an action for that API, and you need to basically take the context of the user and pass it along. So that's why we can't have other external libraries unless it's part of the SharePoint OM. We can use REST API.
Cool.
VTI bin client SVC. I've seen that working. I don't think everything works there because of the metadata stuff. I don't think it works. It might be flaky. It'll just execute. I don't know how much of that would be useful in this action.
Yeah, it depends on a process query, so it depends on a scenario, but cool. I think we're hitting the hour, so let's actually close up gradually the thing. We do apologize if we missed some of the questions. There were so many questions. We need to really pay more attention that there's more time for Q&A in the future. That is in our intention. We're gonna drop down more, but we never will have any more 3 demos in a call because that's pretty insane. So having 2 demos and plenty of time for Q&A is more efficient. So, but I think that's it for this one. So thank you everybody for joining. If you will be in SBC next week, come and drop by. There is a SharePoint Dev community booth where we have PnP crew as well, and the engineering people inside as well. So see you in
And
Las
there's
Vegas.
a Power Apps and Flow.
And there's a Power Apps and Flow booth as well, absolutely. And then if you're not in there, but you will be in European Collaboration Summit on following week, there's a lot of the PnP guys will be there as well. So drop by and ask questions and give us feedback. But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Jax, for a great demo and run through of the different capabilities. The video was recorded successfully. My Skype worked for once in a 10th time. And the video will be properly pushed to the YouTube channel within 24 hours. But thank you, and we'll be absolutely in touch. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.